Hey gang, what's up? Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. The last time Andrew Scheer was on Legacy Media, he lit up David Cochrane, then he lit up Vasi Capellos. Tonight he's with some no-name reporter, and I bet you it's going to go well for Andrew. Not so good for the reporter. This Legacy Media is very confusing. Let's take a look.
Mr. Scheer, welcome back to Power Play. Thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure.
Today, your party came out criticizing the government for not imposing counter tariffs on the United States, especially yesterday when Mr. Carney came out talking about the plan up until July 21st. Why do you think the plan that he presented yesterday isn't good enough?
Well, this is a guy who promised that he would get a deal, that he was the guy that could get things done in a crisis, and we expected him to deliver on that. It was all elbows up during the campaign, but since then we haven't seen any of that. We've seen elbows down, and in some cases elbows tied behind our back. Mark Carney's insisting on keeping the industrial carbon tax. That's something that punishes steel and aluminum workers here in Canada because American manufacturers don't have to pay that. So it's a lot easier to move jobs and investments to the U.S. where that steel and aluminum can be manufactured without the Canadian industrial carbon tax. Mark Carney is doubling down on that. We also wanted to see robust supports for workers affected by that. So, you know, this is again a problem with a Prime Minister that won't present a budget to Canadians, won't outline the path ahead as Canada continues to face some heavy economic headwinds, much of which is imposed on our own economy by the Liberal government.
I take those points, but what about his plan and trying to sort of keep those tariffs and counter tariffs almost in his back pocket for the next 30 days as he continues to negotiate with the United States?
Well, you know, we just expected that he would carry on with the same approach as he promised Canadians that he would, and maybe expecting a Liberal to keep a promise is not a smart thing to do because they always break them. And again, you know, we talk about broken promises. In the throne speech, Mark Carney promised to cap spending at 2%. About an hour later, blew through that with an 8% spending and borrowing hike. He promised to be elbows up all through the campaign. He promised to take these tough lines, and then we see so far since the election's over, he's taking a completely different approach. So I guess what we're saying is we're holding to the standard that he set for himself during the election campaign.
But do you believe that he should continue to follow through on a promise he made during the election, or if he is seeing that things are changing and that there is the possibility of a deal with the United States, that he wouldn't impose counter tariffs because he believes that there is something there, there's a framework there? And I guess, you know, my question is, what do you think is better, that he holds a promise that he had made during the campaign, or that he tries to get the best deal for Canadians that he can at this time?
Well, look, first, let me say, Conservatives want Canada to get a deal on these tariffs. It'll be good for the country, it'll be good for all Canadians, and so we are supportive in that goal. It's a little bit difficult with a Prime Minister who's not keeping Parliament updated, who's not being forthcoming with Canadians about the status of the deal, how close we are, whether or not they're in active negotiations on this part or that.
But do you take the point that he's trying to do the negotiation and not informing you at the time because these negotiations are difficult? I mean, I think we know with Donald Trump that it's hard to know where he's going at the best of times. So do you expect a minute-by-minute update, or do you want them to spend that time working to do the negotiations?
Well, I do think it's important for any politician, especially this close after an election, to be honest with Canadians and to follow through on commitments. If dynamics change,
do you think he's not being honest in terms of the negotiations?
I'm saying he's certainly not adopting the same approach that he was presenting during the campaign. I think you'd have to agree with me on that.
No, I agree that I think a lot of Canadians look at it and they say that, you know, the elbows up that we all considered, and the certainly talking about, you know, putting Donald Trump on notice, and that there has been a tone change. But do you think that it is worth aggravating the U.S. president when we may be close to having a deal with him?
Well, again, you know, it's a bit rich for Carney to suddenly justify this type of approach without a lot of rationale. And I guess what I would say is, if he wanted to explain to Canadians, explain to parliamentarians what's going on, it would help Canadians understand the massive shift in tone and approach.
Would you support a deal with the United States that still had some level of tariffs in place? And I say that because when we look at the deal that is being negotiated or seemingly struck with the United States and the United Kingdom, that there is the removal of most tariffs, but steel is still unclear. If this was put to the Conservatives and put to Parliament, would you support a deal that still had some level of tariffs in it?
Well, it's a big hypothetical to ask me to take a position on something that
well, it is, but it's quite
and B,
possible, and I think a lot of people will look at this and say that that is a distinct possibility.
Well, I would point that conservative governments over multiple U.S. administrations, both Republican and Democrat, have secured deals to keep tariffs off or to remove barriers to trade, like softwood lumber agreements that the previous conservative government secured, while at the same time protecting aspects of our Canadian economy. The goal is no tariffs. Free trade works. It's a conservative principle. Free trade always benefits both countries. When people are allowed to buy and sell freely, willing seller, willing buyer, that's when you get jobs and investments and prosperity. That's when consumers get more affordable prices and workers have more opportunities to sell what they produce. So we are big free traders. That is the goal. We're going to do everything we can to help achieve that goal in opposition, and we'll see what the Liberals come back with. The promise that Mark Carney, he set the bar for himself. We will judge him by the bar he set for himself, and that was he would get a deal to lift these tariffs. So we'll see how he does.
But do you acknowledge that the landscape has changed and it's possible that that may not be what we end up with?
I acknowledge that dealing with this current U.S. administration is difficult, and that Donald Trump absolutely has proven that he can change directions at one point or another. So we recognize that, and no one is under any illusion that it will just be a matter of just a few days and a few phone calls and get this thing resolved. But that is the goal that Mark Carney set for himself. That is what he promised Canadians. He said he was the type of person who could get this done, and that's the commitment that he made to the Canadian people. And that's the standard that he should be judged by.
I want to ask you about your party, and when you consider where they are and what you guys have to do in the summer. I know that we will likely see a by-election where Mr. Poilievre will be running in Alberta, attempting to regain a seat. The latest polling numbers that we see from Nanos Research for CTV News show a gap between the Liberals and the Conservative of about 12 percentage points at this place. Why do you think that has happened now?
Well, I usually don't comment on polls. Polls can go up and down very quickly. You can see polling shifts month to month. It could be wildly different. But what we're focused on is building on the incredible gains that we had in the last election. Pierre Poilievre took our party up to near historic highs, the highest vote total in the Conservative history.
But polling is showing that you wouldn't be there if an election was held today, right now.
But we know that we have an incredibly dynamic team of new members of Parliament from areas that Conservatives haven't won seats in generations. That's because our party has reflected the concerns of Canadians. All those issues that Canadians voted for Conservatives on, the cost of living, the housing crisis, the inflationary deficits that the Liberals rack up, crime plaguing our communities thanks to Liberal catch and release policies when it comes to bail, those issues are still there, and we're still communicating.
But your support isn't,
Canadians.
though. That's the difference.
Again, I'm not going to comment on one poll or another. You know, we still get a tremendous amount of positive feedback from Canadians who are telling us to stay on these issues. It's normal after an election to have some movement, but when we come back in the fall, we will have spent the summer talking to Canadians, continuing to outline how our policies would have worked better than what the Liberals are even now in these early days offering, and at the same time listening to Canadians. Our leader has struck an economic advisory council to get that direct input, that direct feedback, so that when we come back in the fall, we can say not just scrapping the Liberal industrial carbon tax, not just removing the Liberal production cap on oil and gas, but here are some other Conservative policies that would benefit Canadians, and so I look forward to that.
Your leader, I mean, you're the parliamentary leader, but the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, his numbers are a personal low when it comes to preferred prime minister. He's at 24.2%, Mark Carney at 49.7%. Do you think he's still the right guy to lead this party, even though he's 12 points behind your entire party is 12 points behind the Liberals?
Yeah, I wouldn't get too fixated on polls, and Pierre is absolutely the right man to lead this party. He's built this movement. You know, when I go to events for Pierre, whether they're during the election or the lead up, I saw people at those events that had never voted Conservatives, had never voted Conservative, many of whom had never even voted, and they came to those events because Pierre inspired them with his message of hope, restoring that promise of Canada, where once again you could earn a powerful paycheck that could help you afford a home, home.
So
in
he
a
doesn't
safe
need to
community.
change despite losing his seat and him not actually winning government?
No one's suggesting that we don't need to make adjustments. Anytime you don't form government, you have to have those honest conversations with ourselves as a team, as a caucus, as a party.
As a leader for him?
Absolutely. I think Pierre would be the first one to admit that, to acknowledge that when you fall short, you have to make some adjustments. But
What do you think he has to do to adjust?
He's absolutely the right person for the job. When you look at what happened in the last election, we were facing an unprecedented series of events. We had an existential threat from the U.S. where you had a sitting president threatening to annex Canada. We haven't had to deal with that since at least the War of 1812. Right. And then you have the complete and utter collapse of the NDP. But despite all of that, we still got 42% of the vote. We still grew our caucus to over 140 seats and won seats in areas that we had no hope of winning in previous elections.
Agreed.
And
but you
all
still
of
lost
that
the
is
election.
all of that is thanks to Pierre, his inspirational message, and so we just got to build on what's worked, make those adjustments as a party, as a team, and Pierre is going to come back in the fall with a renewed vision for Canada.
So what does he need to do personally, though, since his popularity is not where it was?
Well, you know, we're as a team, we're looking at what happened in the last election, really diving through that to prescribe exactly where we might have been able to improve our vote total. We're going to do that with amongst ourselves and with other Canadians who want us to succeed. We're not going to listen to people who don't want Conservatives to succeed. We're not going to take advice from people who vote against us or who actively cheer for other parties. We're going to do that as a group. And when Pierre starts to unveil the plan for the next election, you're going to see once again an inspirational message that will restore the hope for Canadians. Canada has never been like this before. You know, I look out into the streets and I see violent protests advocating for violence to be done against Jews here in Canada. I see crime waves plaguing our communities. You've got extortion in communities that have never been plagued by that before, all thanks to Liberal policies. Inflation continues to take big bites out of Canadians' pockets, and Carney's doubling down on all those same Trudeau policies. So I'm confident that as people realize that Carney is going to double down on the same failed Trudeau approach, the rhetoric might be different, but the policies are the same: anti-energy, criminals' rights first, high taxes.
Can you really say
spending.
anti-energy if he wants energy corridors and he's laying the groundwork with C5 to build pipelines? Can you really say anti-energy?
He will not take the industrial carbon tax off of Canadian manufacturers. He will not say that he's committed to a new pipeline. He's still saying that there has even with C5, he's still not making a commitment that will include a new pipeline. And he's still in favor of the biggest thing of all, the oil and gas production cap. And when you limit what Canadians can take out of the ground and sell to the world, you are limiting the amount of jobs that can be created. You're limiting the amount of prosperity that can be spread around our Canadian economy from coast to coast. That's the exact same policies as Justin Trudeau. Mark Carney's even doubling down on the EV mandate. The Liberals are going to make it illegal to buy your favorite gas-powered car, truck, or minivan. Mark Carney had an opportunity this week to vote against that ban. He voted to uphold it. So again, he's still doubling down on all these same Trudeau policies.
Okay, unfortunately, Mr. Scheer, we're going to have to leave it there. I appreciate you spending the time with us. Parliamentary Leader for the Conservatives, Andrew Scheer, thanks again.
Thank you very much.
What is right? Like, what is up with the legacy media reporters going so hard at the Conservatives and then giving a back rub to the Liberals? It's just strange to watch. My name's Aaron, Canadian Looney. Like, share, subscribe, come and watch one of the live shows. Thank you for watching this video. Check out one more. Catch you next time, gang.